It's interesting when you look at life and people in general that we don't tend to ask the big questions. We tend to just focus on the little questions. So we'll ask about how much money this costs or how much money I'm earning and all the rest of it. But we don't ask the big question, which is, what is money?
Well, money doesn't really exist. It's a theory. If you look at how the world's been acquired, it's been done by a banking scam where you lend people money that doesn't exist. We call it credit.
This cult is constantly dictating when it goes up and when it goes down. No one ever talks about it. Why? This is fundamental, and I never hear any political party talk about this. I don't hear the wokers talk about it. I don't hear any of them talk about it. This cult has achieved economic dominance on an ever more extreme scale, thus dominance of the choices and freedom of the population, by creating a situation in which they can lend money that doesn't exist, called credit, to the population, and then charge interest on it, and taking as collateral wealth that does exist, land, resources, homes, businesses. And if the population doesn't pay back the credit money that is a figment of the imagination, created out of nothing basically, then the people issuing the credit, i.e. the banking system owned by the cult, gets your wealth that does exist. And through the generations, this exchange of non-existent theoretical money called credit for real wealth and resources has sucked the wealth of the world into the hands of the few. And through that dominance of financial control, they dictate the choices, or lack of them, of the population. And they dictate the choices of black people, white people, Asian people, all different kinds of people and sexualities.
Where you lend people money that doesn't exist, we call it credit. And you charge them interest on it. And if they don't pay the money back plus interest, then you get their wealth that does exist. You get their home, their business, their land, their resources, whatever. And we've been through a process of banks lending credit, figures on a screen, greatly in excess of what they have as assets, called fractional reserve lending. And then when they can't pay it back, because often the banks have taken actions that have crashed the economy, like in 2008, the banks then get all the things they've lent money on, the real wealth of the world. And what's happened in this process of lending credit, getting the real resources when they can't pay back the credit, has sucked the wealth of the world, the real wealth of the world, into the hands of a very, very few people, and left out there most of the rest of the population with something called money.
What is money? And if we don't know what money is, then we can't understand how we're manipulated through the money system, and how what we call banking is legalized theft. And because, of course, it doesn't mean it's lawful, if you like. It doesn't mean it's right or just. It just means it operates within the laws that those that control the banking system and at the same time control the political system have passed to allow banks to be legalized, corrupt, robbers of the people. And they do it like this. And to understand this banking crisis, we've really got to understand, first of all, what money is. When you go into a bank and you ask for a loan on a house or car or whatever, what did the bank do? I mean, what was the process? Again, we don't seem to ask those questions. Oh, well, they lend us money. Well, okay. Well, where do they get it from? What has happened because the same network of families that I've been exposing all this time have controlled, indeed created the banking system as we know it, have also controlled the politicians that pass legislation about banking laws and finance. Laws have been passed to create something called fractional reserve lending. It sounds a boring title and all the rest of it, but we really need to understand what this means. Fractional reserve lending allows banks to lend at least, and it is at least, 10 times what they actually have on deposit. It's called credit.
Why are governments borrowing money from private banking systems and the population paying interest upon that borrowing? Why aren't the governments issuing their own currency interest-free and lending it to the population interest-free to go about their commerce and go about their lives, creating opportunities and choices that they wouldn't otherwise have? Why are we allowing a privately owned, in the end, by a tiny few people, banking system to issue non-existent credit money and then be able to take the wealth of the people if they don't pay it back? And there's another thing on this. The same people that lend the money, the credit, dictate if the economy goes up or the economy goes down.
And money only buys anything because we take it seriously. You know, if it's just a piece of paper, and this is the point, it's meant not even to be a piece of paper, it's meant to be purely electronic. And so we have this fresh air money that is worth something because the buyer and the seller believe in it, and only because of that. And the real wealth of the world has been sucked into the hands of a very few people by lending this scam called credit. Another interesting thing about this money situation is when you go to a bank and you say borrow £50,000, they'll type into your account £50,000 in credit. Where's the credit come from? Here. But you're not paying back £50,000. You're paying back £50,000 plus interest. The interest is never created, only the principal. Because people think that governments create money. Money is overwhelmingly created by private banks issuing credit. That's how so-called money comes into circulation. So what this means is creating credit for the principal but not the interest is that at no point is there ever enough money, credit or otherwise, in circulation to pay back all the debt and all the interest on the debt outstanding.